I moved into the Hawksworth Tower condominiums on a crisp spring afternoon, feeling hopeful about my new life. The building soared 12 stories high, with gleaming windows that reflected the city skyline. I had spent months saving up for a down payment, eager to own my first place in a well-maintained community. The day I arrived, the lobby bustled with people returning from work, but I received only polite nods. People here seemed reserved yet polite. Little did I know how the condominium's HOA politics would soon rock my world, and how one particular individual would become the bane of my existence. "Need help with your boxes?" asked a maintenance worker named Gary, a stout man with a warm smile. We loaded a few things onto a cart, and I followed him to the elevator. As we ascended, Gary asked, "Have you met Ms. Barnett yet?" I shook my head, vaguely recalling the name from a letter I'd received regarding HOA dues. "Not yet." "Why?" Gary gave me a sympathetic grin. "Don't worry. You'll find out soon enough." Little did I realize that this Ms. Barnett, often called Karen by fed-up residents, would become the biggest thorn in my side, championing random and often nonsensical rules in the name of maintaining standards. I would soon learn that nothing escaped her watchful eye. My first official encounter with Karen, Francine Barnett, happened less than a week after I moved in. I was returning from a grocery run, arms loaded with bags, when I heard someone clear her throat behind me. Turning, I caught sight of a woman in her mid-50s with perfectly coiffed hair, a pastel blouse tucked neatly into tailored slacks, and eyes that scanned me as though I were a potential security threat. "You're new," she stated, lips pressed into the faintest suggestion of smile. I bobbed my head, balancing my groceries. "Yes, just moved into Unit 8B. I'm Sam. Nice to meet you." She shifted her weight, arms folding. "Francine Barnett, president of the Hawksworth Tower HOA. Most people address me as Ms. Barnett, but, well, many have grown accustomed to calling me Karen." Her lips curled slightly, showing she knew all too well what they meant by that nickname. Yet she was determined to own it, or at least pretend it didn't bother her. Karen reached into her handbag and pulled out a thick packet of papers, thrusting them in my direction. "Here are the building's guidelines. I noticed the doormat in front of your unit is a shade too vibrant. Per our regulations, doormats should be of a muted or neutral tone, so kindly replace it within a week." Surprised, I struggled to free a hand and take the packet. Sure, I can look into that," I mumbled, glancing at my perfectly ordinary gray doormat, apparently too vibrant for her tastes. Her gaze roamed over me again. "Welcome to Hawksworth Tower. Please ensure you follow all guidelines so we can avoid complications." She pivoted on her heel and strode away, leaving me blinking in her wake. That night, I flipped through the HOA rulebook, my eyes glazing over at the litany of regulations. The acceptable paint finishes for doors, limits on decorative wreaths, noise curfews, pet rules, designated times for moving furniture, even a requirement for uniform window coverings facing the street. I was both annoyed and amused. Perhaps that doormat complaint was just the tip of the iceberg. In the following weeks, I settled into a routine of working remotely during the day and enjoying the modest condo gym in the evenings. I quickly learned that Karen held an almost omnipresent watch over the halls, the lobby, and the courtyard. Residents would warn one another with a whispered "Karen's on the prowl" when they spotted her striding down a corridor, ready to pounce on any minor infraction. I also made a few friends. Lily, who lived in 8A just across from me, an energetic nurse who worked nights. Brandon, a freelance photographer in 9C who often carried expensive camera equipment. May and Curtis, a retired couple in 7D who spent their days tending to the building's potted plants in the atrium. They all had stories about Karen's relentless enforcement. Lily once got fined because her recycling bin lid was left ajar. Brandon was reprimanded for storing camera stands briefly in a shared hallway. May and Curtis got a stern warning for excessive watering of common area plants, allegedly causing water damage to the floor. "She's unstoppable," Lily told me one afternoon, yawning from her night shift. Yeah, the building is spotless, but at what cost? We're all on edge." I looked around at the immaculate hallways. The walls gleamed without a scuff mark. The trash rooms were odorless, and the carpets looked fresh as if shampooed regularly. On the surface, it all seemed great, except for the tension that brewed among residents afraid of Karen's random penalties. One day, a glaring red notice appeared on the bulletin board in the mailroom. Attention, all residents. Effective immediately, the Hawksworth Tower HOA is imposing a special assessment for urgent repairs on the building's fire flotation system. Each unit must contribute $200 toward these repairs. Payment is due in full by the end of the month. Francine Barnett, HOA president. A hush fell over the mailroom as people read and reread the notice. We all exchanged puzzled looks. Fire flotation system? The building wasn't near any large body of water, and nobody had ever mentioned anything like a fire float device at any HOA meeting, at least from what I'd been told. The mere phrase sounded absurdly contradictory. Flotation for fire? I pulled Brandon aside. Have you heard of this system before? He shook his head. Never. I've lived here 5 years. I know about the sprinklers, the smoke alarms, the fire escapes, but not a fire flotation system. Word spread fast. Over the next couple of days, neighbors buzzed with curiosity and suspicion. Many believed it had to be a mistake. But Karen insisted, in a mass email, that the system was critical for occupant safety and that we must pay the special fee to keep the building up to code. At dinner one evening, Lily and I compared notes. I'm no expert, she said, picking at her salad. But as a nurse, I've done my share of fire drills in the hospital. I've never heard of a fire flotation system. It sounds like something from a boat or a maritime facility. I mulled it over, remembering how thorough the city's fire safety inspections usually were. It's strange. Why we never seen or heard of it before? And $200 per unit is a hefty fee for something no one can even locate in the building. We decided to do some investigating. Lily volunteered to talk to the building's maintenance crew. I planned to call the local fire department. If this system truly was a legal requirement, they'd know about it. The more we learned, the more we suspected that Karen might be concocting a scheme, one that looked suspiciously like a cash grab. Before we could gather any real info, Karen herself made a bold move. She sent an email to every resident, announcing that payments for the fire flotation system repair fund must be made via check to the Hawksworth Tower HOA. She included instructions to slide checks under her office door for convenience. All of this raised even more red flags. Normally, special assessments were discussed at HOA board meetings, with official letters, invoices, and references to real contractors. Yet Karen was pushing everything through in an unorthodox manner. She threatened late fees for anyone who didn't pay by the stated deadline. The tone of her email, as always, was condescending. It has come to my attention that some residents questioned the validity of these repairs. Let me assure you, this project is mandatory. I have thoroughly researched our building's safety requirements. Failure to comply jeopardizes everyone's well-being. When I mentioned the fiasco to the front desk concierge, he just shook his head. I got the notice too, but I've never heard of any contractor coming in for such a system. It's not listed in the building's original blueprints, either. Lily, true to her word, tracked down Hank, the building's head of maintenance, a grizzled man with a no-nonsense attitude. After a brief chat, Lily called me, sounding triumphant. Hank says he's never heard of this system in his entire tenure. We have standard sprinklers on every floor, plus standpipes in the stairwells. But no specialized flotation device. He thinks Karen's making it up, or she's mixing up terms. I thanked her and decided to follow through on my plan, calling the local fire department. After navigating through automated menus, I got transferred to an inspector who handled commercial and residential high-rise compliance. When I asked about a fire flotation system, the inspector gave a bewildered laugh. Ma'am, I've never heard of that term in any official capacity. We're aware of sprinklers, extinguishers, standpipes, but not anything called a fire flotation system. Certainly not in your building's records. Encouraged, I asked if there had been any new regulations that might require such an upgrade. He firmly replied, "No, absolutely not." This confirmed our suspicions. Karen's special assessment was bogus. But how could we prove it to everyone else? We needed undeniable evidence, and we needed it before the first wave of payments began to pour into her pockets, if that was indeed her scheme. Conveniently, a monthly HOA meeting was scheduled just a few days after the suspicious notice went up. It was usually held in the building's community lounge, located off the main lobby. Under normal circumstances, only a handful of residents would attend, just enough to meet quorum. But this time, word had spread like wildfire, and nearly 50 people packed into the lounge, fuming with questions. Karen, perched at the head of a long conference table, seemed taken aback by the crowd. She tried to begin in her usual haughty tone. "Good evening, everyone. Let's start by reviewing last month's minutes." Someone interrupted. "What about this fire flotation system? We're not paying until you explain what we're actually paying for." Karen's face tightened, but she forced a smile. "It's an advanced fire safety mechanism that keeps water reservoirs in prime condition should a blaze occur," another resident shouted. "But where is it located? None of us can find any reference to it in the building schematics." Eyes darted around. Karen clasped her hands, her gaze flicking to a sheaf of papers in front of her. "It's installed behind the utility walls. The plans might be older. Things have changed over the years." I stood, heart pounding. I spoke to the local fire department. They said no such system exists, and we have no new mandates requiring this kind of upgrade. A murmur of agreement rippled across the room. Karen's jaw clenched as she shot me a frosty glare. "I assure you, we are in compliance with city requirements. I've spoken to contractors personally. Now, if you'd kindly..." Lily leapt up, and I spoke with Hank in maintenance. "He has no knowledge of it. If the system needed repairs, surely the building's maintenance head would know first." The tension was palpable. Karen's usual bravado wavered. She tried to deflect, launching into an incoherent explanation about complex mechanical operations that laypeople wouldn't understand. But the crowd was done listening to half-truths. Mr. Coleman, an older man from the 10th floor with a booming voice, demanded, "We want to see a formal quote from an actual contractor, detailing the scope of work. Until then, we're withholding payment." Cheers broke out, and Karen banged a small gavel to restore order. She insisted she'd produce the documents by the following week, though her eyes betrayed panic. The meeting dissolved into anxious chatter. Our HOA president retreated swiftly to her office, giving no further explanation. Over the next few days, Karen tried every tactic in the book to salvage her fire flotation system narrative. First, she posted a half-baked contractor statement in the mailroom, featuring an unreadable signature and vague references to water containment improvements. But upon closer inspection, the contractor's name, Active Fire and Float Incorporated, had no local business listing and no official phone number or license attached. "It's a complete fraud," Brandon noted, snapping photos of the notice with his camera. "She's forging documents." Neighbors were furious. A wave of distrust spread through the building. Several people who had already paid the $200 demanded refunds. Karen emailed them with a short, dismissive response. "Refund will be processed only if the project is deemed non-essential." We caught glimpses of Karen rushing in and out of the lobby, wearing a tense expression. It was as if the walls were closing in on her. Meanwhile, we awaited her next move and the next HOA meeting where she was supposed to produce legitimate paperwork. A week later, Karen emailed the entire building. She was convening an emergency session of the HOA board to present evidence of the fire flotation system. Her message read, "Dear residents, due to the unfortunate spread of misinformation, I will be presenting comprehensive documentation and proof of the building's fire flotation system. We have contracted a specialized firm that has guaranteed the necessity of these repairs. I trust this will clear up the confusion. Francine Barnett." But the word specialized firm only raised more eyebrows. In hushed conversations, many neighbors strategized. We should be ready with questions, ask for credentials, contractor licenses, anything to pin her down. The day of the emergency session arrived. The lounge once again overflowed with concerned residents, many armed with printouts of building codes, phone record from the fire department, and references to official city inspection logs. The atmosphere crackled with tension. Karen sauntered into the room late, carrying a manila folder. She took a seat and, with forced composure, stated, "I have here proof of the repairs needed. Our building's original design included a hidden flotation reservoir. It was never documented properly, but we have discovered it requires urgent maintenance." She placed a folder on the table and passed out grainy black and white photocopies of what looked like random piping diagrams. None bore the Hawksworth Tower name or a contractor's heading. Her flimsy explanation was riddled with contradictions. Mr. Coleman, our de facto spokesperson, leaned forward. "With all due respect, Ms. Barnett, these images don't prove anything. Where's the contractor's license? Where's the official bid or invoice?" Karen bristled. "They're in the process of finalizing it. These are preliminary schematics. I expect the final document soon." I couldn't stay silent. "And yet the deadline for paying you is also soon. How can we trust you to handle thousands of dollars if you can't even provide an authentic contractor name and license number?" The room erupted in agreement. Karen's nostrils flared. She opened her mouth to retort, but Lily cut in. "We contacted the local fire department. They confirmed there's no such mandated system. They also said no new codes exist requiring flotation devices in high-rises." A flicker of panic crossed Karen's face. She snapped, "We have to be proactive. It's not always about mandated codes, but about going above and beyond. If we wait for a tragedy, it'll be too late." Brandon lifted his phone, displaying a screenshot of a fake contractor scam article. "This looks awfully similar to known hoaxes where someone invents a phony maintenance project to collect money." For a moment, Karen seemed at a loss. Then she rose, voice trembling with indignation. "I will not be subjected to these baseless accusations. I've served this building for 7 years, ensuring top-notch standards. If you all want to risk your safety, that's on you." She fled the room before anyone else could object. The silence left behind was profound, broken only by the shuffle of papers and exasperated whispers. That night, a small group of us gathered in the hallway outside Karen's office. We knocked on the door, intending to demand a real explanation or a refund. But there was no answer. The door was locked, and the lights inside were off. We decided to wait. After an hour, we heard the ding of an elevator. Karen stepped out, purse clutched tightly, exuding her usual air of hostility. She froze when she saw all of us. Mr. Coleman spoke first. "We're not leaving until we settle this matter." Karen set her jaw. "It's past office hours. Any concerns can be emailed." "This is urgent," I interrupted. "People have already written you checks. You owe them transparency." She fumbled with her keys. "I have nothing more to say. Now, if you don't mind." Lily blocked her from entering the office. "Then at least give them their money back until you can prove it's legitimate. That's fair, isn't it?" Karen's eyes blazed. For a second, it seemed she'd lash out, but she merely hissed, "Fine. Anyone who wants a refund can request it in writing. I'll consider each case individually." She ducked past Lily, unlocked the door, and slipped inside, slamming it shut behind her. We exchanged troubled looks. It was more stalling. Meanwhile, Karen was clearly unraveling under the weight of suspicion. At dawn the next morning, Brandon knocked on my door. "I did some detective work," he said, brandishing a folder. "I found no record of a company called Active Fire and Float Incorporated in the state's business registry. No website, no phone listing. It's non-existent." Together, we compiled a list of all the residents who had already handed over money. There were about 15 people, mostly older folks who trusted the HOA's word or didn't want trouble. That amounted to $3,000 in Karen's possession. We worried about how she intended to spend it. We discovered a neighbor named Lisa, who used to do the HOA's bookkeeping before Karen took full control. Lisa revealed, ever since Francine, Karen, got re-elected as president, she insisted on handling the finances personally. She took over the check deposits, claiming she wanted to streamline everything. Now we can't see the books. This secrecy only heightened our alarm. If Karen was funneling money to herself, we needed proof. We decided that if she failed to produce real contractor documents within a week, we'd file an official complaint with the city's housing authority and possibly even pursue legal action. A few nights later, I was heading back from a late run when I noticed unusual activity in the building's basement level, where the storage rooms and mechanical facilities were located. Through a small window in the stairwell door, I glimpsed Karen talking to a man in coveralls. She handed him an envelope, and they seemed to be discussing something while looking at the pipes. My curiosity piqued. I carefully descended a few steps to listen. Their voices echoed in the otherwise silent corridor. The man said, "I can't fix what doesn't exist. Just sign off on your claim if that's what you really want." Karen's retort was muffled, but I heard the words, "Just do it, and I need some kind of proof." A surge of adrenaline spiked through me. She was paying someone to fabricate documentation of a non-existent system. Moments later, the man stomped past me, mumbling curses under his breath. Karen lingered, looking shaken. Then she hurried off in the opposite direction, presumably back to her office. I stood there, heart pounding. We needed to expose her, but we had to be methodical. Hard evidence was key. By the next morning, I shared what I witnessed with Lily, Brandon, and Lisa. We decided to call an emergency meeting of our own. This time, just the residents, excluding Karen. We gathered in the lounge, about 20 people in total, fuming over her blatant misconduct. "I'm done waiting," Lily said, arms crossed. "She's either scamming us for personal gain or funneling the money somewhere else." May and Curtis, the sweet retired couple, looked disheartened. "We paid right away," May whispered. Karen made it sound so urgent. "But now I feel foolish." I patted her shoulder. "Don't. She exploited your trust. We'll set this right." Mr. Coleman stepped up as a natural leader. "We can approach the HOA board in motion to suspend Karen's authority until she's cleared of wrongdoing. We'll ask for an internal audit of finances." "Yes," Lisa agreed. "I can help with that. I used to handle the books. If we can force an audit, we'll trace every check." We resolved to gather written statements from any residents who felt scammed, then present them alongside official findings from the fire department. Our plan: confront Karen publicly at the next scheduled board session in 3 days. If she tried to dodge, we'd escalate to city officials. We posted a sign in the lobby announcing our resident-led meeting, making it clear we sought transparency about the fire flotation system. Within hours, Karen retaliated. She fired off a mass email. "Residents, it has come to my attention that individuals are conspiring to undermine the HOA's authority. This reckless behavior endangers our building's safety measures. Anyone participating in unauthorized meetings risks disciplinary action from a board." Francine Barnett, HOA president. Her threats only fueled our determination. The hush that once dampened everyone's willingness to speak out was gone. We'd had enough. The building that used to tiptoe around Karen's dictates was now galvanizing into action against her. The man I'd seen in the basement suddenly became a potential key witness. With Brandon's help, we poked around local contractor listings and asked the maintenance team if they'd seen a new worker on site. Eventually, one of the janitors mentioned a short, balding man who'd come in late at night with Karen's permission, calling himself an emergency repairman. Brandon set up a small stakeout by the basement stairwell, hoping to catch him again. One evening, he got lucky. The man arrived around 10 p.m., rummaging through the mechanical room with a small flashlight. Brandon quietly crept closer. "Hello," Brandon called, feigning innocence. The man whirled, looking startled. "Are you the contractor for the new system? Fire flotation or something?" The man's face reddened. "Yeah, something like that." He wouldn't meet Brandon's eyes. Brandon introduced himself, ironically praising the man's effort. "We're so thankful to have experts like you. Could you explain what you're working on exactly?" The man hesitated, muttering, "I just fix what the client asks. Ms. Barnett says she needs a statement for water lines. Don't ask me the details." Then he brushed past, heading for the elevator. The encounter confirmed that he wasn't doing real repairs, just forging or fabricating paper to support Karen's story. Though we lacked a direct confession, we had enough to proceed. The day of the official HOA board session arrived. Everyone gathered in the lounge, anxious. Karen sat at the head of the table, flanked by 2 board members she had personally recruited, people rumored to be under her sway. On the other side sat an independent board member, Ms. Delgado, who'd historically clashed with Karen's excessive rules. Mr. Coleman stood up, clearing his throat. Madam President, on behalf of a large portion of residents, we request immediate discussion of the special assessment for the so-called fire flotation system. We have strong evidence it doesn't exist and that funds collected have been misused. Karen tried to maintain composure. Very well. Proceed. He handed out printouts of the local fire department statement, verifying there was no code or requirement for such a system. He presented a signed affidavit from Hank, the maintenance chief, confirming no knowledge of any hidden reservoir or device in Hawksworth Tower. Finally, he read a letter from the city's licensing bureau stating Active Fire and Float, Incorporated, was not a registered company. The tension was electric. Karen's stoic mask faltered. There must be an error, she said, flipping through the documents with shaking hands. Sometimes contractors use a D/B/a name. Ms. Delgado interjected. We want to see the actual repairs. Where are they? Where's the location of this supposed system? Karen stammered. It's behind sealed walls. We can't just open them up. A chorus of protests erupted. May's voice rose, tremulous yet firm. I want my $200 back. I can't afford to lose money on a false project. Karen's eyes darted around, searching for an ally. One of her loyal board members tried to step in. Let's maintain order. Ms. Barnett has served us diligently. Lisa, the former bookkeeper, marched up to the table. I demand an audit of the HOA's finances. We want to see the bank statements, the checks deposited for this so-called repair. She turned to the crowd. When I did the finances, everything was transparent. Now it's hidden behind Ms. Barnett's personal control. Karen slammed her gavel. This is out of line. The board alone decides on audits. But Ms. Delgado leaned forward. Francine, you're not the entire board. I move that we vote on an immediate audit. A wave of applause rolled through the lounge. Karen's face turned pale. She clung to her final shred of authority. You can't vote me out on a whim, she barked. No one said vote you out, but we are entitled to an investigation, Ms. Delgado replied calmly. This building's bylaws allow for a simple majority of the board to initiate a financial review. I stand with Mr. Coleman and the residents. One of Karen's cronies looked uncomfortable. The other avoided eye contact. Under the intense public pressure, they knew it would be political suicide to side with Karen. Finally, they muttered agreement. The motion carried. Karen's shoulders sagged. She gave a tight smile. Fine. An audit it is. You'll see that everything is perfectly legitimate. We all knew that was unlikely. Yet, the wheels were set in motion. The big question, would Karen try to cover her tracks before the auditors stepped in? In the days following the showdown, rumors flew that Karen was shredding documents or transferring funds to a hidden account. Lisa, acting as the new interim treasurer for the HOA, demanded immediate access to the bank statements. Karen refused, citing privacy concerns. Frustrated, Ms. Delgado escalated the matter to the city's Department of Housing and Community Regulation. They had the power to force an audit if the HOA president was blocking legitimate requests. Once official notices were filed, Karen could no longer stall. We saw her in the lobby one morning, face pinched with stress, on a phone call that sounded heated. But you said you'd handle this quietly. That's not my problem. I paid you for the documents. She stormed off, not realizing Lily and Brandon overheard every word. Meanwhile, more residents submitted written demands for refunds. A wave of negative sentiment flooded the building's email list. Some talked openly of removing Karen from her post at the upcoming election, or sooner, via a special recall process. The once all-powerful HOA president was teetering on the brink. Despite her obvious wrongdoings, a small part of me wondered if Karen's motives were purely greed or if something else was driving her. Sometimes, people do the wrong things under pressure. Maybe she had financial troubles, personal obligations, or something else that led her to orchestrate this scheme. Then, one afternoon, Lily found Karen alone in the corridor, slumped against the wall. Her eyes were red, as if she'd been crying. Lily told me about it later. She looked so defeated. I almost felt sorry for her. But any sympathy was tempered by the fact that Karen had lied to everyone, demanding money for a phantom repair. Our building's seniors in particular had been deceived into paying. Compassion only went so far when trust was so blatantly violated. The official auditor from the city's Department of Housing arrived on a Monday morning. A tall, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Lockwood introduced herself to the board, then requested immediate access to the HOA's financial records, bank statements, receipts, invoices. Lisa guided Ms. Lockwood into the cramped HOA office, where Karen was forced to unlock file cabinets. We, the curious residents, waited in the lounge, exchanging anxious glances as they worked behind closed doors. The tension was palpable. Hours passed. Finally, Ms. Lockwood emerged, looking stern. Karen followed, face pale. Lisa trailed them, lips pressed tight in anger or triumph, maybe both. Ms. Lockwood addressed the gathered residents. I have found several irregularities in the financial documentation related to this fire flotation system project. The contractor checks appear to have been deposited into an account under Ms. Barnett's name rather than the official HOA account. Gasps erupted. Karen's eyes darted around, unable to speak. Ms. Lockwood continued, "There is no valid contractor license, no legitimate invoice, and no city permit application for these alleged repairs. Based on what I've seen, the city has grounds to investigate potential fraud." A stunned hush fell. Everyone looked at Karen, waiting for an explanation, an apology, something. For a moment, it seemed Karen might bluff her way out again. But faced with Ms. Lockwood's official statement, her composure crumbled. She sank into a chair, burying her face in her hands. "All right," she whispered, voice trembling. "All right, it's not real." She looked up, eyes glistening with tears. "I needed the money. I'm in debt, okay? I never intended to hurt anyone. I panicked." The room filled with murmurs, shock, anger, maybe a hint of pity. Lily stepped forward gently. "Karen, you scammed us. That's serious." Karen nodded miserably. "I know. I was desperate. The building finances were in good shape, but my personal ones weren't. I thought I'd borrow the money and pay it back before anyone noticed. I never meant for it to go this far." Ms. Lockwood cleared her throat, stepping in as a neutral presence. "Nevertheless, Ms. Barnett, these are criminal allegations. The residents have the right to press charges or at least demand full restitution." Karen's eyes flickered with fear. "I'll return every cent," she pleaded. "I'll resign from the board, whatever it takes." We crowded into the lounge, everyone struggling with a swirl of emotions. May, who had lost $200, seemed the most upset, tears in her eyes. Others looked furious yet conflicted. Did we want Karen arrested? Did we want restitution? How could we trust her again? Ms. Delgado, always calm, spoke softly. "Let's handle this systematically. We can let the authorities do their part. Meanwhile, the HOA can accept her resignation and demand immediate reimbursement for all who paid, plus any administrative costs." Mr. Coleman agreed. "We can vote on whether to press charges. But if she refunds everyone promptly and steps down, maybe we can resolve this without a lengthy court battle, as long as we have the city's oversight to ensure compliance." A wave of nods. Lisa offered, "I'll coordinate the refunds. We'll keep the audit open until every check is accounted for." Karen, still seated with her head in her hands, muttered, "Thank you, thank you." But no one responded warmly. She had burned too many bridges. At best, we'd accept restitution. We certainly wouldn't accept her leadership anymore. In the days that followed, the building buzzed with a sense of relief and lingering tension. Karen officially resigned from the HOA presidency. Lisa, Ms. Delgado, and Mr. Coleman took over as interim leaders until the next election. They communicated openly about finances, posted real contractor quotes for legitimate building projects, and encouraged residents to ask questions. Everyone who had paid into the fire flotation system fund got their money back. Karen scraped together the refund. No one was entirely sure how, but rumor had it she borrowed from family or took out a small loan. True to her word, she didn't resist. She simply wanted to avoid a criminal record, if possible. The city's Department of Housing left the door open for legal repercussions. But once the stolen funds were returned and Karen was no longer in a position of power, the immediate threat seemed to dissipate. Some residents felt she deserved punishment. Others believed her confession and swift restitution was enough. With Karen gone, the atmosphere in Hawksworth Tower lightened considerably. The strict, arbitrary rules she'd once enforced lost their bite, especially those that had no basis in the original bylaws. Over time, people replaced her nonsensical signage with friendlier, more reasonable notices. At the next formal HOA meeting, Ms. Delgado, serving as interim president, outlined a plan to update the building's policies. She included transparency measures like mandatory itemized budgets, open quarterly audits, and multiple signatories for any special assessment funds. Everyone applauded. We learned the hard way how vital these safeguards were. I noticed neighbors chatting more freely in the hallways, forging new friendships now that they weren't living in fear of petty fines and random fees. May and Curtis returned to happily tending the atrium's greenery, free from Karen's constant scolding. Lily had fewer headaches about random citations. Brandon focused on his photography, capturing candid shots of a newly relaxed community. While the building was eager to move on, Karen was still there, occupying her condominium, and soon, we learned, preparing to move out. Late one evening, I saw a for sale sign taped on her door. She must have known it was impossible to remain in the place she had once ruled with an iron fist. On her final night, Karen stood alone in the lobby with a few cardboard boxes. I happened to walk by, exchanging an awkward glance. She managed a thin smile. "Well, I guess that's it," she said softly. I shrugged, not quite sure how to respond. "Things change," I offered, feeling a twinge of sympathy despite everything. Karen sighed, eyes flicking around the pristine lobby she once obsessively micromanaged. "I really did want the best for this building, she said. "I just lost my way." We stood there in silence, her admission hanging in the air. Finally, she extended her hand, whether out of politeness or genuine remorse. I couldn't tell. I shook it, more from pity than anything else. "Take care," she murmured, then walked out into the night. The door hissed shut behind her, leaving me with a swirl of conflicting emotions. Anger, relief, perhaps a small measure of forgiveness. One thing was certain. Hawksworth Tower would never be the same. In the weeks following Karen's departure, the building underwent a period of reflection. We'd survived a bizarre scam and come out stronger. Some folks still felt betrayed, while others pitied Karen's desperation. But the new spirit in Hawksworth Tower was undeniably more open, transparent, and collaborative. Lisa, Ms. Delgado, and Mr. Coleman, along with a group of motivated residents, revised the HOA bylaws, ensuring no single person could unilaterally impose fees or handle large sums of money. They scheduled monthly open forums where anyone could voice concerns. Gone were the days of hush-hush decisions behind Karen's locked office door. We even held a community day in the lounge, complete with potluck dishes and homemade desserts. It felt almost festive to gather without the usual tension. The building that once seemed a pressure cooker under Karen's rule was now a warm, supportive environment. Though the ordeal ended with a sense of relief, it left a permanent lesson etched into everyone's minds. Never blindly trust an authoritarian figure just because they hold the title of HOA president. Ask questions, demand proof, and don't be afraid to unite with neighbors when something feels off. Brandon's photographs from the fiasco, shots of the bogus contractor notice, the outraged crowd at the emergency meeting, and the final handshake with the city auditor became a quasi-chronicle of the building scandal. He even joked about submitting them to a local news outlet for a stranger-than-fiction piece on HOA politics gone wrong. But most residents, wanting to move forward quietly, declined the spotlight. Still, we each held our own mental album of the drama. From the first sight of that red fire flotation system fee notice, to the moment Karen broke down in tears before the entire community, to the final handshake in the lobby. Life carried on. With Karen gone, we discovered a new sense of autonomy. Sure, we still had rules. This was an HOA after all, but they were clearer, fairer, and far less arbitrary. We started focusing on real improvements, upgrading the actual fire alarms, refurbishing the worn-out carpeting in the hallways, and planning social events that brought neighbors together instead of dividing them. One sunny weekend, Lily and I stood on the rooftop terrace, admiring the skyline. It's crazy to think how close we came to losing a bunch of money over that fake system, she mused. I nodded. At least we learned how important it is to push back, to ask for evidence. And we found out we have a pretty amazing community when we unite. She grinned. Yeah, we do. Looking over the city, I felt a surge of gratitude. Hawksworth Tower had faced a near catastrophe, albeit a somewhat ridiculous one, and emerged wiser, more cohesive. No longer did we tiptoe around the halls, fearing random edicts from on high. In a strange way, Karen's scheme had galvanized us to become a better version of ourselves. A few months later, word trickled back that Karen had sold her condo. Some said she moved to a smaller town to escape the shame of her scandal. Others claimed she had family who took her in while she sorted out her debts. Regardless, she vanished from our daily lives, leaving behind a building that still bore the echoes of her misguided rule. From time to time, the older residents would quip, "Careful, or Karen will come back to collect a fee for that," whenever someone suggested an unpopular idea. We used humor to soothe the memory of those tense days. Yet, the building's finances remained stable. Membership soared in the HOA committees, and we continued to enjoy a peaceful coexistence. And if anyone ever dared mention a fire flotation system, we'd share a knowing laugh, a relic of the biggest HOA farce Hawksworth Tower had ever seen. Today, Hawksworth Tower stands as a testament to resilience and community spirit. The once overbearing policies have been replaced by balanced guidelines that respect individual homeowners while keeping common areas pristine. Resident engagement is at an all-time high, with well-attended meetings and diverse committees that represent everyone's interests. Looking around, I see neighbors chatting amiably in the lobby, exchanging jokes, or planning the next social mixer. The environment is friendly, warm, and welcoming, everything I'd hoped for when I first moved in. We're no longer strangers bound by a watchful tyrant, but a collective of homeowners who genuinely look out for each other. And so we end with a positive note. We exposed Karen's fraudulent scheme. We reclaimed our building's finances. We rebuilt trust by implementing transparent processes. We discovered that unity among neighbors can topple even the most obstinate Karen. Life in Hawksworth Tower, once overshadowed by bizarre fees and petty rules, now shines with a renewed sense of camaraderie and openness. Our story stands as a reminder that even the most unscrupulous actions can be overcome when good neighbors band together, refuse to be bullied, and insist on honesty and fairness. The building's fire flotation system never existed. Yet in exposing that lie, we gained something real and lasting, a more vibrant, harmonious community.